Most of you probably assume the Dreamcast life ended in 2002 when both the Dreamcast and its official game releases ceased production, right? Well, if you lived in Japan, the console did see intimate game releases until 2007, and SEGA even supported hardware replacements for quite some time. If you then think the Dreamcast story ended there, it actually didn't, at least in the West. I'm sure you guys know of the Naomi arcade hardware, right? It was basically a Dreamcast for the arcade, and ports of its games did appear on Dreamcast. Well, in 2002, another arcade board with the Dreamcast specs was created in a collaborative effort by Sammy, SEGA and SNK. It was called the Atomiswave. They sure knew how to repurpose the Dreamcast's hardware for another shot at the arcade market. Thanks to the efforts of the gaming community, some of these games have now seen ports that can now work on a real SEGA Dreamcast. But of course, emulation is also a viable option, and today I'm using Redream once again to show off as many games as I can. Not all will work with a controller, unfortunately. I'll get to those games as we go along. Now then, let's try out all of the games that got a successful port so far. We will start with Animal Basket. This one is part of the family line of arcade games from Sammy. The game is played in tape mode, but thankfully you won't need to rotate the screen to play this one. The game is weird to say the least. Basically, there's a giraffe with a basket in the middle of the play area, and balls are shooting off from the left side of the screen. Your job is to grab the loose balls and fire them into the ever-moving basket. The face buttons control one of the characters when the ball lands in the square. You have to press rapidly to get your character to the ball first and then shoot with a different button. The team that gets the most balls in the basket wins. As you can probably tell, most will not play this game due to its family-friendly nature, but hey, it was released for the platform and now you can play it anytime you like. Block Pong Pong is another game in the Sammy family line. This one is just a basic game of Pong. Hit the ball to knock down your opponent's defenses until the ball goes straight through. The game is nothing special and I didn't like the graphics. I know this is for children, but I would feel insulted playing this if I went to the arcade as a child. Next game please. Oh, finally, a real game. This is Demolish Fist. It's a beat 'em up game in the vein of others like Streets of Rage. You can pick from a bunch of characters and off you go. The game doesn't use many buttons, just a kick, punch, jump and your special move, and block as well. You can also pick up various items to throw at your foes, and yes, weapons are available to pound those who wish not to stand aside. The special move though, man, I can't get enough of it. Once activated, time slows down and you mash the A button prompt to attack everything at once. This never gets old, I promise. For the most part, you'll find yourself mashing buttons a bit to get off different combos, and you'll also realise your character can hit someone from behind every other frame, which I found immensely helpful later on. Unfortunately, being an arcade game, the difficulty is harsh, frequently seeing death before you know what's hit you. Even the environment hates you. Yikes. Don't expect to breeze through this one. Actually, that's a lie, as the free play mode is active so you can actually breeze through if you wanted to. The graphics and sound are alright enough, and the controls, once you get used to them, are pretty solid. Not on the level of Streets of Rage, but better than Fighting Force. The soundtrack is upbeat enough, but it's not going on my iPod. Overall, not a bad way to spend an afternoon if you are feeling up to the challenge. Give it a shot and enjoy. Now we have Dirty Pigskin Football. This is a sports game which has you playing American football in a most unusual way. I guess Halloween came early, eh? Well, it is October to be fair. Moving on, this is an arcadey take on American football. As I'm not American and know little about the sport, I got taken apart. At the start of each match, you can figure out or change formations, and once the players break, you need to pick out the perfect passes and run for your life towards the touchline to score points. Be aware, tackles fly in every which way and they are brutal. Oh yes, physical and violent, just like the doctor ordered. You also have super throws at your disposal. Not sure if I executed one here, but I did manage a fantastic pass to my teammate here. See, I'm not completely hopeless. The graphics are alright, although I did appreciate the horror Halloween look everyone was donning for the occasion. The sound was quite punchy and definitely captured the arcade feeling rather well. Honestly, I can't remember if the soundtrack was any good or not, so I won't comment on that. The game is ultimately not for me, but it played well enough. American football fans should be satisfied with this effort.
Good side, Ivory. Second down.
Faster Than Speed is next, and it's the first racing game on the list. That means I'm in my element. I would call this game a crossover between the Need for Speed Underground titles and your typical A to B racing games. The objective is simple: choose a car, its colour, a track of your choice, and off you go. All you need to do is beat the straggler who thinks he can defeat you. To aid you in this epic challenge, you have a nitrous button which, when activated, will make everything go insane. The speed is dramatically increased. The screen throws the car forward with lots of particle effects going off. It's a spectacular moment each time. You do lose visibility with it active, so it's best to use it on the straights and not around corners. Other than this, the novelty wears off pretty fast, and overall, this is a pretty standard effort. I'm not saying the game isn't fun, I thought it was, but the formula doesn't drastically change and the gameplay is nothing special. Certainly give this game a play or two. Fist of the North Star is next, and this one is special. It was made by the guys who gave us Guilty Gear, and you know what that means? Of course you do! A game that plays beautifully, looks fantastic, and has a rocking soundtrack. While it doesn't play exactly the same as Guilty Gear, the DNA is definitely there. This is a great thing because Arc System Works know what they are doing. There's just so much to like about this game. Me trying to explain it to you does it no justice. Basically, if you love Guilty Gear or have an interest in 2D fighting games, you need to check this one out. It's a hidden gem, and to be able to play it on Dreamcast or emulation like Redream is a blessing in disguise.
Lose.
Force 5 is a 3D fighting game that apparently wasn't released for the Atomiswave. How the person managed to find it and then make it work on Dreamcast and emulation is beyond me. This game definitely reminded me of Virtua Fighter for sure. There's only a kick, jump, grab and block button. To get different combos and the like, you need to input different motions at the right time. Again, feels like Virtua Fighter, only the execution wasn't as good. It's hard to really get going sometimes, and the hits come so fast, and frequently combos get interrupted more than I'd like. Blocking isn't always effective either. Getting caught out will be a regular occurrence until you really get the hang of the combat mechanics. The game supports widescreen, which is nice to see, and the graphics look alright. Nothing special, but I'm not offended either. The sound effects are a bit cheap, and the game's volume is a bit too loud for its own good. I know it's an arcade game, but 6 decibels lower would have been better. This is not a bad game, but Virtua Fighter is a bit better. Still, try it for yourself. It's still some fun.
Round 2. Fight!
Guilty Gear Isuka is next, and you'd think this would be a winner, right? After all, Guilty Gear games are usually amazing. However, this game has an interesting twist. There's multiple planes you can fight on, including the foreground, and more than 2 people can fight at once. The other change is your character will not change their direction on the fly. You have to do it manually, and this leads to a lot of cheap shots. I wish it was automatic, or at the very least, a character could hit behind them. They can't in this game. Otherwise, the game is the same great gameplay experience you'd expect from the series at this point. This new gameplay mechanic, however, seems to ruin an otherwise interesting idea. It just frustrates more than creates fun. The idea I'm not against, but I wish it was just the typical 2D fighting we are all used to. Plus, whenever there's 2 opponents to fight at once, I always lose at this point, and so will you, at least at first. I will say the soundtrack is absolutely brilliant and easily one of the best in the series. This did get a PlayStation 2 port, so you can play it there, but it's nice that we can now play it elsewhere, especially on the Dreamcast. Not my favourite Guilty Gear game, but it's not a bad game, and that's what counts. Guilty Gear X makes an appearance officially called version 1.5. This was the second game in the series and actually appeared on the Dreamcast for the Japanese market before a PlayStation 2 port appeared worldwide. So why would you need this version? Well, it has newer moves borrowed from Guilty Gear XX, and it has rebalanced gameplay and music for the characters has been moved around. Only minor additions then, but the gameplay is definitely improved and still as fantastic as it ever has been. This, without doubt, is the best Guilty Gear game on the Atomiswave, and it's one of the best games here. It's just not that special, as we already had a great playing version for the 2 consoles mentioned earlier. Still, Guilty Gear X is amazing, and do not pass this newer version up. The fighting game craze continues with Kenju. This was also unreleased if I'm correct. This is a 2D game but with 3D shell-shaded graphics. It looks and animates pretty well. Like the other fighting games mentioned so far, this one controls in a similar fashion. You have a kick, punch, jump and grab buttons as expected, but the game's claim to fame is the air launch button. Once a certain portion of the bar is full, you press 2 buttons together, and if this connects, you can attack several times while airborne. This is a great way to chop off your foe's health bar. Otherwise, the rest of the game is a pretty standard fighting game. That's not a bad thing, mind you. It plays well enough, and the presentation is definitely its standout feature. Give it a try and let me know what you think of this game. This is Maximum Speed and it's a fighting game. No, I'm lying. It's a racing game in the vein of Daytona, USA. You can race a NASCAR-like vehicle, a pickup truck, and an open-wheel race car. You can pick any track you like and off you go to chase victory. The circuits range from ovals to tracks with many corners. That'll keep you on your toes. If you time your launch at the start, you'll get a big boost of speed. I found this by accident, by the way. Overall, this is a pretty standard Daytona clone. Not bad, just not very original. I did notice the shadow graphics are very glitchy though. I wonder why that is. Could it be Redream? Not sure. Regardless, this is a decent game to play now and again. Try it out. Metal Slug 6 continues the run and gun franchise in style. Yes, SNK felt compelled to continue their support for the Dreamcast-based arcade and produced this banger. The Metal Slug games need no introduction. They're a series of run and gun games where you save prisoners, defeat enemy soldiers, and beat a boss at the end. Armed with a pistol and a few grenades at the start, you'll be picking up shotguns, flaming cocktails, flamethrowers, and so on. Of course, you will pilot the Metal Slug, a tank that can take punishment as well as dish out some back at those in its way. Other modes of transport are available throughout the game, although they are not as good as the original Slug. The graphics, sound and gameplay are top notch as expected, and the fun keeps on coming. This is a game that you'll want to keep playing as so much is going on, and it's great. This might not be the best game in the series, but who cares? When something is this fun and well made, that opinion shouldn't really matter. What does matter is that the Dreamcast has another solid game in the series that you, the player, can now finally experience. Speaking of run and gun games, Dolphin Blue throws itself onto the scene, and you know what? It's even better than Metal Slug 6. Yes, shock horror and gasp as you the viewer hears those words, but it really is. The gameplay is exquisite, playing just as well as Metal Slug, but with more interesting locations, taking advantage of the water-based levels the game is set in, and having even better graphics. Then, there's just the satisfaction of beating everyone who's in the way. You never want it to end. The senses in your brain overload at the sight of what challenge you need to overcome next, but the game and its excellent controls give you the power to succeed. Even when you lose, you simply carry on as if nothing has happened. The game is unfair sometimes, and the bosses can take time to defeat, but there's so much good about this experience, you really can't complain. What a fantastic game all around, and to cap it off, the soundtrack and sound effects take this game to the next level. If you have to play one game from the Atomiswave, this is it. A hidden gem without doubt. Now, back to the fighting game genre with Neo Geo Battle Coliseum. This game has a number of different SNK characters from their different games, duking it out for some kind of glory, I guess. There's so many characters to pick from, and your head will just spin. The game is played out like a typical King of Fighters game, only now you can switch your characters out on the fly, and the game is more like a survival mode. You see, if you lose, even once, your gameplay is practically over. You have to beat the computer 3 times to advance to the next stage, and you can only gain back limited health after each match. The gameplay is pure King of Fighters, in other words, fast and fun with easy combos to learn and with great controls to boot. The music and sound effects are top notch too and round out a great package. I guess we can call this the unofficial continuation of the SNK vs Capcom line of games. I will say the graphics did somewhat disappoint me. The 3D backgrounds look amazing with great detail, but the 2D sprites used are very low quality. It looks as if they came from an older game and then badly upscaled them with bilinear filtering for a very blurry output. They animate well enough, so it's disappointing that they stick out like a sore thumb. We really needed SNK to stop recycling the graphics at this point. Don't let that put you off, the game is still a cracker and worth a play or 10.
You lose.
Samurai Shodown 6 is another SNK fighting game. If you recall, I actually reviewed the 4th game in the series and it was fantastic on the Saturn with a decent port also on the PlayStation. This 6th entry has so many characters, you'll wonder what to do next. Explaining the game is a bit of a waste as it does feel quite similar to the 4th game, albeit a lot faster and with more options to pick from. This game is not as violent for some reason, and there's no fatalities this time around, which is a bit disappointing. The game is much too hard for its own good. Might be acceptable for the hardcore fans, but not for me. The game is still great to play, and the added speed will please those who maybe found the previous games a bit too slow. But the charm and uniqueness the previous games had is somewhat lost here. This is what happens when you try to appeal to those who didn't appreciate why the games were special in the first place. Never mind, at least the 6th game is still fun and definitely worth your time. The King of Fighters 11 is another great fighting game in the long-running series. Like Neo Geo Battle Coliseum beforehand, this is a 2D fighting game in which you engage in a 3-on-3 battle until a victor emerges. The same strengths and weaknesses apply to this game as they fundamentally feel very similar. That means great gameplay, sound and music, but mismatched graphics and brutal difficulty. At least the game doesn't play like a survival mode this time around, which I definitely preferred. Overall, another great SNK title to add to the Dreamcast collection.
Let it go!
The Rumblefish is a 2D fighting game. Yes, another one. This one explains how to play before you play, which is a nice gesture. There's a few characters to pick from and Garnet stands out for some reason. One thing, this game is brutal. I couldn't get past this dude no matter how many times I tried. Damn, looks like I won't be getting much further today. The music is great and the graphics are actually really nice. This is how SNK should have done it. Sadly for most of you, this won't see much playtime. It's too hard for its own good. Luckily, the developers listened and made a sequel not long after. The same gameplay and graphics are used, and even the soundtrack is the same. This time, there's a few more characters to pick from, and get this, the difficulty is not as tough as before. Don't get me wrong, the game still kicks my Glutamus Maximus more than I'd like, but I actually got further, and I feel the gameplay refinements make the game a lot more fun. I also like the stage designs too. Job well done all around for the graphics and the design of the stages. I can definitely recommend the second game, but you will still need patience and practice if you are to play this game. Wai Wai Drive is another game in the Sammy family game line. This one has you collecting items in a house while you drive a toy car. Once collected, the items stick onto you as if you were suddenly playing a game of Snake. Your foe will be doing the same, so make sure you're quick. You can both steal each other's hard work just to rub it in, but it's very easy to lose the line. It becomes a matter of timing to steal the line before the time is up. The small room and lack of maneuvering only add to the fun. Just kidding, it really doesn't. All it does is make me mad that I can't make sharp turns and bouncing off walls, and your opponent will become your worst nightmare, as you can see. I think I'm confident in saying that you can skip this one unless you are that curious, like me. I played it, so you don't have to. You may have noticed there are some games that I missed out on this list. That's because these games need light guns or fishing rods to activate, and Redream doesn't give me a way to change this, so I was unable to play these games. One game though, Knights of Valor, the Seven Spirits, just did not want to start on Redream. It does work on my Dreamcast, and it's a pretty great 2D beat 'em up game with nice gameplay and good looking graphics. I definitely recommend that game, and it will push you all the way. There we are folks, those are the Atomiswave games that you can now play on your Dreamcast or your favourite Dreamcast emulator. This was a lot of fun to check out, and to discover this lost piece of the Dreamcast history makes me wonder what else is out there for us to discover. There's more than a good dozen games for this platform that are worth playing more than once, and it's great to see how much effort was put into these games. Yes, there are throwaway titles as expected, but these are far and few between. Some of the games did get PlayStation 2 ports as explained earlier, but there's something special about them coming home to proper Dreamcast hardware. There's still a few more left to port, so who knows? We might get more games to play in the near future. What did you folks think of the Atomiswave games that got ported to the Dreamcast and other Dreamcast emulators? Let me know in the comments, and hopefully I'll see you guys again soon.